Welcome back to Grim and Whim. Today we will be pondering the paranormal by looking at the strange and iconic history of one Lizzie Borden, the murder of her father and stepmother, and the hauntings that have taken place at the Borden family home. So without further ado, let's ponder together. Before getting into the hauntings, it is important to provide some context. So let's begin by looking at the story of Lizzie Borden and how she was charged for brutally murdering her own parents. On August 4th, 1892, in the city of Fall River, Massachusetts, a husband and wife were found murdered in their home, and the gruesome sight shocked the community. So much so that these killings had become a legendary part of American history. The married couple was Andrew Borden, who was a millionaire mill owner, and Abby Borden, who was Andrew's second wife. And despite the fact that the murder happened in broad daylight and the house sat on a fairly busy street with many pedestrians walking by and local businesses, there were no sounds of screaming or struggle heard by anyone in the neighborhood. Local newspaper accounts stated the following. On the day of this double homicide at 11 o'clock, Mr. Borden was lounging in the sitting room reading a newspaper. He was seen by his daughter Lizzie and by the servant Bridget Sullivan as they passed through the living room at the same time. Lizzie left the house to go to the barn while the servant Bridget was on her way to the second floor to clean the windows. Mrs. Borden was in her room over the parlor, and she was changing her dress as she was on her way to visit some neighbors who were ill. Just 15 minutes later, Lizzie Borden re-entered the house and came upon her father's body, horribly mutilated and lying in a pool of his own blood. She screamed for help, and Bridget Sullivan, the maid, stopped what she was doing to rush to Lizzie's aid. A neighbor named Mrs. Churchill also heard Lizzie scream, and she rushed over to help. Nobody was seen leaving any entrance of the house. There was also nothing taken from the home, so the crime didn't appear to be a robbery gone wrong. Lizzie then began calling out for her stepmother, but there was no response. She ran upstairs to her stepmother's room, and she fainted when she opened the door. Abby Borden was found in a similar state as her husband, gruesomely murdered, her skull crushed in by some kind of heavy instrument. It was later discovered that both Mr. and Mrs. Borden were bludgeoned to death by an axe. Following this discovery, the police were notified and the house was put on lockdown. Obviously, no one was allowed on the property as the police were investigating the murder mystery. But the public flocked to the Borden home, and everyone was eager to know what exactly happened to this very prominent and wealthy family in their community. The police arrested 3 persons of interest on suspicion, but the only really suspicious circumstances about them was the fact that they had been seen in the area around the same time as the murder. However, the case took a huge turn when only a week later, on August 11th, Lizzie Borden, the daughter, was arrested for the murder of her father and stepmother. When Lizzie was initially questioned, her story was not quite adding up. She constantly contradicted herself and the alibi that she gave, and her overall demeanor was very calm for a person who had just come across a double homicide. But despite her strange behavior, mannerisms, and the constantly changing alibis, Lizzie was not thoroughly checked for bloodstains or any signs of struggle, and this ended up being a huge mistake on the police's part. Police did search her room, but it was only a quick inspection. They really didn't do very much of a thorough job. And later on during the trial, the police did admit that they didn't do a proper search of the home because Lizzie was not feeling well that day. And they were subsequently criticized for their lack of diligence in searching Lizzie's room and also searching her body for evidence properly. The trial ensued, and ultimately, Lizzie Borden was acquitted for the axe murders of her father and stepmother. And this was largely due to the fact that the police didn't gather the necessary evidence to make a case that Lizzie did this. And so Lizzie Borden ended up being acquitted. But to this day, nobody has been officially charged with their murders, and there has been speculation over the years whether or not Lizzie got away with murder or if she was wrongfully arrested in the first place. However, most people do believe that Lizzie Borden was responsible for her stepmother and her father's demise. Despite the intense ostracism from the community, Lizzie remained in Fall River until she died of pneumonia at the age of 66. So that is the background of Lizzie Borden and the murder of Andrew and Abby Borden. But you're probably asking, what makes this a paranormal pondering? Well, the Borden family home has definitely been noted as a property with significant paranormal activity in the United States. You can actually stay the night in the home as it is currently operating as a bed and breakfast, as well as a museum featuring a variety of tours and experiences throughout the day and evening. The accounts of guests who have stayed the night and taken the various home and cemetery tours are definitely intriguing, especially if you are a history buff or if you're just really into creepy old houses.
The first night we were here, I heard ruffling in my room, ruffling around like somebody was walking around the room.
Heard something else?
She heard all kinds of
Oh yeah, I was scared to death the first night, and he was snoring. So I was so scared I couldn't even get out of my bed to go over to the counter to get a box of Kleenex that I needed. So I just suffered through the night because I didn't want to get out of bed. I was afraid. So I'm not afraid of ghosts unless they're gonna hurt you, but I did want to see some and hear some, so we got what we wanted. And
in the United States, so many people have been captivated by the story of Lizzie Borden and this gruesome murder. And there's even a poem, pretty well-known poem about Lizzie Borden. You may have heard it. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. And when she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. So it's no wonder that with so much speculation about the murders and it being just this really infamous murder mystery, it makes sense that so many people would want to come and see the Borden house, and people have flocked to this home over the years. And so because of this, it is now a fairly thriving tourist attraction. Like I said before, you can visit the home and take tours, and you can also stay the night. And there have been some truly interesting accounts. One account from a man referred to as Boyd on the website, he had a very interesting stay, and this happened fairly recently in March 2024. Boyd stated that at the Lizzie Borden house where he stayed, he arrived a bit earlier than the other guests. And so he had a few hours to sort of just roam the house and tour it by himself. In that time, he greeted the spirits of the house and invited them to communicate with him if they felt so inclined. After settling in for a quiet night of reading, he stepped outside and bumped into some other guests that were just arriving and invited them to come see his room. Upon entering his room, he notices this doll that was not there before, and it was now lying face down on his bed. Guests and staff have also reported the sounds of footsteps, the sounds of furniture being dragged throughout the house in the middle of the night, interior doors of the home just randomly opening, sounds of giggling, the appearances of shadowy figures and even full-bodied apparitions, and items being knocked over repeatedly by unseen forces.
My shampoo bottle got knocked over 3 times.
And every time you kept putting it back up? And
I put it on the thing, I turned around and it fell on the floor. I put it back up, it fell on the floor. I put it back on the thing. I took about 2 steps and it got knocked on the floor again.
One of the more chilling accounts came from a guest named Aaron Kilby. And Aaron was in the basement on the extended part of the house tour in October 2022, and he was snapping some pictures. One of the photos that he took was a framed picture of a woman, and to the woman's right, you can see an eerie reflection of another woman. And the photos are unedited, and you can see Aaron's reflection as he takes the photo. You can see his red shirt sort of reflecting in the left side of the frame. But then on the right side of the frame, you can also see what looks like to be the face of a woman. Shortly before going to the basement, Aaron remembered feeling very cold upstairs, and he was actually using an EMF detector, and he really was starting to get these like spikes on his EMF detector. And whether or not you believe in EMF detectors, I personally don't find them to be the most reliable. I think that it's an interesting concept, but I don't think that they're very reliable. But definitely the feeling of being really cold all of a sudden in certain areas, that's something I've experienced before. And so, like I said, it's sort of up to you whether or not you think anything is going on in this house. There have also been many reports from both guests and staff who have felt a presence of a woman in the basement. So perhaps this person that Aaron captured in the reflection, maybe it was somebody trying to do a spiritual photobomb. But with all that being said, I hope that you enjoyed learning about Lizzie Borden and the continued mystery of whether or not she murdered her father and stepmother. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for joining me. It's goodbye for now, but I hope to haunt you again soon.